So hello everyone and welcome to today's Geeks Talk Thursday. So what is Geeks Talk Thursday? Maybe for those who are it's the first time. It's a community for developers to learn, engage and share knowledge. And we have that tagline, which is let the commit speak. And also we have like a kind of a website, which is a blog for those who maybe like writing blogs and all that. You can also maybe sign up as a author, maybe in case you want to write, maybe in case you also want to read maybe from guys who write at Geeks Thursday, you can have a check on that. Yes, so it's just a community where we learn, engage, share knowledge. We don't have like a specific thing. We do like mobile, web, and also maybe the topics that are cut across maybe the developer ecosystem. That can be projects, pricing. Maybe last week we had a session on how to maybe plan projects, and today we have a session on Git Workflows. So we don't have like a specific kind of a thing where we don't have like a specific kind of a topic. So in case you even have like a thing you want us to share, to discuss on, you can maybe suggest and we'll have a look at it. Yeah, so what we do like every Thursday, as I was explaining, we have intro to development, we have code labs, fireside chats, productivity talks. We also have product reviews, stroke launching, in case you have like a cool thing that you want to us to maybe guys to review, and maybe in case you want to launch like a product, you can also maybe, this is like the platform, and also we discuss a couple of open source projects or ideas, or even in case you have a project that you want guys to contribute, this is also the session. Yeah, so that is what we do like every Thursday. We do this every Thursday from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So we also have like other activities that you can check out. We have Fun Friday by Kodi, which happens every Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's bi-weekly. We also have the blog, as I said, it's Geeks of Thursday. In case you want to try out maybe on writing, in case you want to maybe you also read, you can maybe check out Geeks of Thursday. We also have Android 254 Open Bar, which is every Friday from 7:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. So Open Bar is just like a, what do I call it? It's a conversation on Telegram where we have a guest and you can ask them questions, etc. And it's just a period in time where you can discuss anything at Telegram, since we have like a couple of strict rules. But at this time, it's totally free to do anything. We also have Atlassian community events. We like twice in a month. So watch out for the event for next week. And we also have like Atlassian community on Pemba, same thing with Android 254, but this one happens every Sunday. And so maybe these are other things that I feel like you should check out. And now, yes, you can find us on YouTube. All these sessions, we usually record them and upload them on YouTube. Also on GitHub, you can find us on Geeks of Thursday. And Slack, we have a Slack channels, though not very active, but that is like the URL. I will share the invite link later on. So today, I'll be the moderator. I'm Harun Ongereka. I'm the developer at AppsLab. That's my Twitter handle. Yes, our speaker today is Michael Bukachi, software engineer at FarmDrive. I'll let him introduce himself. Michael?
Okay. Hi everyone. As Harun mentioned, I am Michael Bukachi. I am currently the lead engineer at a company called FarmDrive. Yeah, and I'm also an open source contributor to DroidCon, or maintainer at DroidCon.
Awesome. So our topic today is Git Workflows. Bukachi is going to take us about Git Workflows. So in case you have like a question, feel free to ask. Either you can maybe raise your hand or maybe ask on the chat, and we'll answer as we go through the session. So Bukachi, take us off.
Okay. Git Workflows. I'm pretty sure, I'm hoping that everyone has heard about it or is willing to hear about it. I would say Git workflows are okay. I'll be blunt. It's like when Microsoft took over GitHub, they are really pissed off by the fact that they didn't have their own internal CI/CD tooling. They had to rely on Travis. So they came up with GitHub Actions. It's like a competitor to GitLab CI/CD or Atlassian's Bitbucket and integrations. I don't remember the exact name. Yeah, but yeah, that's what GitHub Actions is in general. It's a tooling. It's CI and CD tooling integrated into GitHub so that it's easy for developers to quickly deploy or quickly test apps or systems they are working on. It's meant to be a standalone integration without having to have any third-party integrations using webhooks and whatnot. So yeah, in general, I would say GitHub Actions, the best way to describe it, it's a competitor to GitLab or competitor to Atlassian's CI/CD. Do I need to share slides or? I think okay. Okay.
Let me just give you the ability to share. I'll stop sharing so you can share.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
you
will
should be able to
just
share now.
Okay, cool. Let me just share the entire desktop. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So this is a makeshift poster of GitHub Actions. I stole the image from somewhere online and I've been playing around it. So GitHub Actions. Don't ignore my horrible artistic presentation. But yeah, GitHub Actions. Like I said, it's a CI/CD tooling. CI/CD tooling by Microsoft. They wanted to produce something that is equivalent to what GitLab offers and what Atlassian offers. And I would say they did a pretty good job. GitHub Actions are really comprehensive. It's still growing. It's not, I wouldn't say it's feature complete at the moment, but it's really, really mature. Production systems are already using it. We use it at DroidCon, I think. Yeah, we use it at DroidCon for deploying and testing and just basically the entire process. Yeah, so let's get into it. I did not prepare any specific slides for this session, but I will be taking you through just a general overview of how GitHub Actions work. I think I'll use the DroidCon 2020 demo to do this. I think it's usually where, oh, hey. Okay, one thing to note about GitHub Actions, it follows the same approach as other CI/CD tooling, where they really don't want you to expose it as a normal project directory. So most of the time you find that the configurations for actions are in a hidden folder. Okay, hidden folder on Linux and Mac. I'm not sure about Windows. Yeah, but that's the general idea. The same way you'd have your configurations for GitLab in .gitlab folder or configurations for Circle CI in .circle CI folder. That's the approach they went with. The directory structure is a bit different, but it's pretty much the same functionality where you add your configurations there, and as long as you push your code to GitHub, it will recognize the folders and trigger the appropriate actions. So most of GitHub Actions, in fact, and besides the special kind of actions like the ones for customizing your PRs and merge request templates, most of the actions occur in the workflows folder. Basically, you have the .github folder, then in the .github folder, you have a workflows folder. And I'm not currently aware if there's a limit to the number of actions you can add into the workflows folder. That's something I have to check, but you can add as many actions as possible. There are some people or some devs who prefer separating their different jobs into different files. So that if they want to do that, you can freely do that. As you can see in this folder, there's two different actions. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is, like most CI/CD tooling, they make use of YAML configurations. So if you are if you've interacted with YAML before, then it should be a walk in the park in terms of getting familiar with the syntax for the tooling. Yeah, as I said, you can decide to separate your jobs or the actions to separate files, or you can decide to combine all your actions into a single file. The preference depends on the person who's actually setting up the configurations. So we'll take a look at the greetings YAML. It's a simple action which we use to we use to introduce developers to our George con. Let's start. Can you all see my screen properly, or do I need to zoom?
Increase the font size.
Okay. Where is that? I can't see. Why is this here? I can't see my. Okay. View. Where is the zooming thing for this one? Keyboard control. Is it control plus? I'm not sure. Keyboard shortcut. Sorry about. Zoom. Who's used gedit before? How do you zoom on this? How do you zoom on gedit?
I will try control plus.
Control plus. Raise. Okay. Oh, oops. Let me just close this window. No, that's not working. Or maybe it's because mine. No, it's not. That's not working. They usually. Okay. So let me just use a different editor.
Yeah. Try select all and control plus.
Oh, okay. That's not. Oops, what have I done? Okay, that's not working. I'm pretty sure there are controls for it somewhere here. Okay, let me just use a different editor. Okay, okay. How do you zoom? Okay, oh yeah, this is much better. Yeah, so I hope that's better. Yeah, so an action, like I said earlier, it uses YAML syntax. I think most, if not all, CI/CD tooling usually use YAML. I don't know why they use YAML. I have to do a bit of research why they tend to choose YAML. I think maybe it's because it's like a general language for configuration. Anyway, yeah. So when you talk about when you talk of a GitHub action, there's a couple of things you have to note. The first thing is there's the name section where you actually give your action a name. It's according to convention, it's usually a good idea to give the action a name of what it does. For instance, in this action, it greets the user or greets first-time contributors. If it was maybe something to do with deployment, you could call it deploy to server or deploy to staging server. How you come up with the name, it's up to the prerogative of the developer. Creativity is your limit. But yeah, the first thing you always have to do is add a name to your action, and it's a required field. You cannot have an action which doesn't have a name. Once you have a name, the thing you have to do is add a trigger. Okay, for like other CD toolings, for an action you have to configure a trigger. So when does this action run? It's also a required parameter when setting up an action, but it has a bit of configuration and options to explore. For this one, it's a simple one. It's the action is supposed to run when an issue is created, or when a PR is opened. So it could be when a developer pushes to a branch, or when a branch is deleted. You can really explore this. Now where I think where the power of YAML comes in, because you can really make use of all all its capabilities from, I think there's even support for using if conditions. There's support for reading from environment variables and triggering on specific conditions in the branch or in the container or in the action. So yeah, this is the second required field for an action. You have to define when it gets triggered. Yeah, so that once you do that, you have now the job section. So now the job section is a section which you can define one or more jobs. So a job in GitHub Action is more this. I think it's similar to it's similar to what is on GitLab or Bitbucket. Basically, it's like a task, for lack of a better word. It's like breaking down the entire. Okay, no, it's not a task. It's like a subtask. Okay, you have an action, and this action you do a couple of tasks. So you would call those task jobs. So each task has to have a unique name. You cannot have two jobs called with the same name. For instance, in this action, we have a job called greeting. We cannot have another job called greeting. And for each job, you can have a specific set of configurations. You can customize each job to a specific condition or specific trigger. You can have, it's really, I would, as much as it's not as mature as the rest of the CI/CD tooling, it really is like feature rich. You can do a lot with the configurations of jobs. So once you specify the name, you have to specify the environment. Now, most of the time, I think they tend to favor Ubuntu-based operating systems. Yeah, because I think they use containers. So, but most of the containers tend to be Ubuntu-based. There's also Mac-based containers for devs who are doing maybe Mac-specific jobs, or maybe if you're on Android and maybe you need to bring up an emulator, then it's really highly recommended you use a Mac-based container because it has better integration with the hardware and the emulation. But yeah, there's a wide variety of OSs to choose from. It's really just easier to play it safe and just choose the Ubuntu latest. Currently, I think it's pointing to Ubuntu 18.04. I'm not sure if they've already updated it to use Ubuntu 20. I'm yet to verify that, but last time I checked, it was using Ubuntu 18.04. So if you are familiar with building or deploying or doing tasks on Ubuntu 18, then you should be right at home. Yeah, so once you specify the runs on step configuration, you now define the steps. For each job or for each task, there is a list. You can have a list of steps that job does, and I think the steps are executed sequentially. So as in, for instance, this is step one. Then you can, after that step one, you can define step two, you can define step three, and each step is kind of determined by the use of the hyphen. So for instance, if I wanted to add a new step, I would define it as users. Oh, GitHub Actions has a concept of actions. It's okay. That was not a very good description, but basically you can actually build your custom action, this file, based on other actions. It's kind of the same concept for Docker containers, how they layer things up, where you have this OS, then you build up, or you have this container, then you build upon that container, and so on and so forth. So actions have the same. In fact, I would say when you get into actions, the first thing you should actually check out is GitHub Actions Marketplace. Yeah, Marketplace. Basically, this is like a marketplace where they've defined all actions, or they've tried to collaborate all actions associated with GitHub. So for instance, if I needed to do something with Android, just search for the corresponding action and see what's there in store. This, whenever you are dealing, or whenever you are working on action, this is the first place I would recommend to, I'd insist on going to before you actually start working on your action, because how well you're able to utilize this site will is dynamic. It determines how much effort you'd have to put into writing your action. For instance, if I needed to bring up an emulator to do a couple of UI tests. I would look for an action that does it already for me. Since for anyone who is familiar with dealing with emulators on CI and CD, it's usually a big pain, especially when working on environments like Travis or GitLab. There's a lot that goes into that environment just to properly bring up an action. So to save yourself a lot of time and pain, I'd recommend as soon as you want to define an action, the first thing you have to do is check out the GitHub marketplace and search a specific action. For instance, if I was doing some JavaScript and maybe I needed some Angular setup, or like Cypress, that the E2E test, I would just search Cypress. Yeah, and most of the time you find like if you have a specific action you are looking for, some there's official support. Basically, when I talk about official support, is if it's cypress.io, it's the Cypress team which actually comes up or writes the action. For instance, here it's written by this action was created by Cypress. As you saw earlier in the previous search, there is Android app size difference, which is by Microsoft. So you find that there is like vendor specific actions which are produced by the vendors of the libraries or the projects you're working on, which is really handy, especially if you're one of those devs who has like trust issues and like, you don't trust other people's code. But a good thing about actions also is that most actions, if not all, are usually they're open source. It's like hosting a container on Docker Hub. Chances are you can actually find the code on GitHub. Yeah. So if you have one of those devs who have like trust issues, you can actually go through the source code of the action and see, okay, what's happening here, what's happening there. Yeah, so I think that's a really good thing they did when they set up this marketplace, where you can have the ability to view the source code of the action, just to get familiar with what is happening behind the scenes, getting rid of the magic. Yeah, so as I said earlier, this is really the first place I would go for to search for an action. As you can see here, the action you find is what you define here as actions, and give it the name. For instance, if you enter the Cypress version, Cypress.io, then maybe specify the version. Now, depending on how frequently actions are released, there's version 1, version 2. It now depends on the person maintaining the action. For instance, for our first interaction, we had to search for the first interaction action, or just search interaction, and you'll find, okay, this is actually produced by GitHub itself. It's a vendor specific action. It just introduces you to the action, and most actions actually give you like a configuration on how to use it. For ever since I started using actions, I don't think I've ever seen a GitHub action which does not have an action.yaml file which actually shows you how to use the action. So that's a really good thing. Also, it's documentation ready. So for anyone who's a first timer to the actions world, they can easily get into it and have something running very quickly. Yeah. So as I said earlier, you can define multiple actions, and most of the time it's executed sequentially. So as I keep adding more and more actions to the list, it's GitHub, when the job is running, it will be executed sequentially. The only case I think it's not executed sequentially is maybe when you're using a matrix. A matrix is a way of defining multiple jobs using one step, for lack of a better description. I will show you the other action we use for DroidCon. A good example. Oh, when I say so here we have one step, or one which uses one action. Okay, no, this one uses multiple actions. We have one step here, which makes use. Oh yeah, that's something I forgot. And a step can actually make use of multiple actions. And the order it's sequential in order, so it goes down the list to it will action first, then go to the graph function, set up Java. So it just goes down the list as you can have I think almost unlimited number of actions, but not sure exactly. So yeah, that once you define your step, each action usually has like a list of parameters or list of configurations specific to what the action does. So for in this first interaction step, because the action needs to post a message or needs to interact with the existing GitHub repo, you'd have to like configure it with your repo token, which is a secret in GitHub. This is, I think, to configure a secret, you'd have to go to a repos. You have to go to a repo. It's somewhere in the settings. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, you'd have to go to your repo. Okay, here, yeah, and configure the secrets for that repo. I think it's similar to what happened in GitLab and Atlassian, where you can specify environment variables in some of the settings. Yeah, there's actually a secret section in the project where you can actually define the repo secrets. And all will be available in the action as long as you know the exact identifier for the repo. Then depending on the action, or it has other configurations. For instance, here it's thank you for your first issue. If it's a prayer message, yeah, it's okay. Now this part is where you'd have to go to the repo for the action or the definition of the README in the marketplace to actually figure out how to use the action. As I said, each action has different a different use case. It's not a one shoe fits all. You can find that this action maybe is responsible for deploying to a server using rsync or SSH, or this one does an FTP upload. If you look at this file, this action that is just responsible for checking code from the GitHub repo. This one is meant for validating your Gradle configurations. This one sets up Java. So the sky is the limit in terms of which actions you want to use. For each action, as I said earlier, you can configure it. For instance, here we're configuring Java version 8. If maybe the project required Java 11, Java 14, you define it. Every time you define an action, you have the option of configuring it with using the with block. If you notice here, you can use more than one configuration. It's totally dependent on the action. Any questions so far before I proceed?
Yes, I have a question. In the marketplace, do we have like some actions which are charged, or all of them are free?
That is a really good question. I'm not. I think yeah, they are actions. I've never really used any paid action or had anyone use a paid action, so that I verify. But it seems here there's like a or is it maybe it's I don't think so. I don't think is that a paid action? I've never seen a paid action before. Most of them since the code is already on GitHub.
Yeah.
Let me just do a quick search. But then again, this marketplace is also for apps. I don't know. I've never seen a paid action before.
Oh, so all of them are free.
So I'm not really sure. I think most of them are free. It's the same way on Docker Hub, and it's not on a private repo. The moment it's public, the code is on GitHub, so you can actually go see what's going on. So yeah, I think okay, and okay. Oh yeah, they actually this is a you actually have that. It's like an action or an app. I'm not sure. Oh no, this is an application. This is an action. I don't think there are paid actions. If there are, then I've never interacted with any. Yeah, I don't think they're paid actions. They're not paid actions. All of them are usually free. I don't think they're paid actions. If they are, then I've never interacted with any of them, or I've not had anyone interacting with any of them. So that's something I'd have to verify and get back to you.
Okay.
I think, Michael,
Uh-huh.
just I think what I can add is that I don't really think they can be paid actions, but maybe the actions integrate a service which you can pay for. Say an action
Yeah,
which integrates, say, Firebase or something like Twilio SMS or yeah.
yes, I agree with. Yeah, that's what I would. Yeah, true. Because if you had like a paid service, which maybe as you said, Twilio or Firebase, and maybe you need to push to that service or make use of that service, like send an SMS as soon as a PR is merged or PR is pushed. That will be an interesting. That's a very interesting integration. But yeah, I think you'd have to make use of GitHub secrets and maybe use the environment variable to access the I know and provide those secrets to the action so that it can use the paid feature. But someone charging an action itself, I don't think I've ever seen someone do it, or I've not interacted with any action that was paid. Yeah, for instance, here there's a Twilio SMS action. But yeah, it's free because you can see the code is even on GitHub, but you'd have to provide your secrets to the action. Yeah, so I don't think they are paid actions. There are actions which use paid services, but I don't think they are paid action. Is there any other question? Great. So as I was, once you define your what your step or what your steps what your steps are, you can have now you can have what's the word? There's a specific configuration called run. It's basically like the lines for checking out actions, but here you actually specify the commands the action is running. This is where you have, like, for instance, if you had like custom bash scripts or custom bash commands you'd have to execute, then you'd make use of the run steps in your YAML file. For instance, here in this action, we needed to clear the Gradle caches with each build. We didn't want to use caches from the previous build, so we just move the Gradle caches to a different folder. You can actually have multiple run configurations in a step. You can name them. You can choose not to name them. Basically, I think this is more of YAML's configurations. For instance, if I wanted to have multiple commands, to run multiple commands, I would actually just use the YAML configuration for arrays or lists. Oops. And just have multiple configurations. Just list them. And just do something. Although you can decide to separate them into like have one run command per name so that it's easier to track, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty, and you can actually mix and match run configuration, your custom run configurations with configurations which use existing actions. So for instance, here in this file, we started off with a couple of actions. Then we came down to our custom run command. Then after that, we went back to an action. We came back here to use a different action. So you can actually mix and match and play around with it. You don't have to actually define them in a specific order. You just have to understand how your workflow is flowing, and just create put up the steps and configurations according to your workflow. And I think this is because you're using Ubuntu. What the default command the default shell command is bash. Yeah, I think it's bash. So if you are familiar with bash, you can do much anything as long as it's within bash constraints. So if you need to do like fancy if condition expressions, maybe add a loop, Yeah, you should be able to do it because it's basically bash. I think there's a way you can actually specify a shell, the shell for the environment you're running, uh, but on the documentation. But you can actually specify which shell you need to use in an action.
So just a
Then
quick one on this,
uh-huh.
Kyle. So assuming like these actions maybe take time, is there a way like you can configure them to run like parallel? Maybe let's say instead of having like a build taking like, since they work like once you commit and then the actions run. So instead of having like it to run like for 2 to 4 minutes, is there a way like you can maybe run several actions parallel? And two, can you like kind of cache most of these configurations in case you don't want like to fetch something each time?
Yes, GitHub, for most part, actions are cached. So you can actually configure a cache for an action or for a specific step so that the next time it runs, it kind of pulls out from the cache. If you wanted to, by default, all jobs defined in the jobs, all jobs defined in an action configuration file run at the same time. So it's not like one job runs after the other. All the jobs run at the same time. So if you needed a situation where maybe we are running UI tests on the browser and maybe we need to check for Chrome and Firefox or Opera at the same time, you just have to define a different job for each of those for each of those browsers, and they would run at the same time. If you need to have like a job execute like multiple steps at the same time, you can actually define something called a matrix. A matrix is a way of a specific job to kind of replicate itself and execute itself at the same time while executing. Okay, it's replicating itself so that it executes whatever it's executing at the same time. A good example is here. Here we define a matrix. You find that in most situations, a good example is one for the browser on the web where you have multiple browsers you're testing your web app with, and you find that besides like a single configuration where maybe your user agent is this or the browser is this, you find that the entire job would have a pretty similar configuration. So it wouldn't be wise to have like 7 jobs which have the exact same configuration except for one field. So in that situation, you'd actually make use of something called a matrix. Now, to make use of a matrix, first of all, you have to make sure that the action you're using kind of supports it. It's something which has to be configured in the action itself. So you have to verify that the action you're using supports the use of matrices. So once you verify that it supports the use of a matrix, you can actually just provide variables. For instance, in this instrumented test job, we provided a matrix of API 21 and API 29. So what this means is everything you see here, every configuration defined in this job will be duplicated according to the size of the array. So if maybe we wanted to run all API versions from 16 to 29, you could just define all, and you just have to specify with API level, or set a matrix. When you set the value of a matrix, it kind of like sets a temporary environment variable, for lack of a better word, or a configuration value, which you can kind of reference later. So what happens with GitHub Actions? It kind of does the duplication for you. So for each value specified in a matrix or matrix array, it kind of duplicates that job, but then passes the specific value in the array to that job. So you didn't have to actually duplicate all jobs. If you had like a situation where you needed to test multiple things at the same time, you can just use a matrix and it will automatically duplicate it for you. One thing to note is, I think the free plan of GitHub Actions has a limit, and I'm not sure if it's 20 or 50 jobs at the same time. If you upgrade to the paid plan, or each plan has a different limit to the number of simultaneous jobs you can do at once. Something I've noted about GitHub Actions is, I don't know it's because it's young or they just really have really good hardware support, is the queuing is it's almost non-existent. Okay, I don't know if anyone has experienced queuing in terms of adding jobs to CI, but I personally haven't. And I've never set up my own, I haven't set up my own instance of a runner. So I think that I don't know if it's because it's young or it's because it's Microsoft and GitHub and they have just really good hardware and server support. It's something I noticed with GitHub, or no, with GitLab, where there are days where you queue a job and you're waiting for an hour or 2 hours before it's picked up by the tooling. So I personally I haven't, and maybe someone has a different story, but with GitHub Action, it's also possible to add your own runners in case maybe you need like some hardware intensive job. Maybe you're doing some machine learning kind of thing, or you're crunching some heavy numbers, and maybe you have like a 16 core server running somewhere for your company and you just want to use that runner. Then yeah, you can actually set up your own runner and integrate it with GitHub Actions. I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah, you have answered.
Yeah, so you can actually configure your jobs to run at the same time with the same configuration without having to duplicate each job. Yeah, so that's the basic overview of GitHub Actions. I really hope I covered what was necessary. I think if I missed out anything, you can just ask the question in the chat, or just ask the question. There are any questions?
Okay, Mike.
Sorry?
I think I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having maybe you talked about queues and timeouts maybe. So considering that we have 60, our timeout is 60, then we have this queue job screen. Can I maybe have something like the priority? So can I prioritize some tasks and have some run as a background? So maybe have some run on background, and then maybe probably execute some jobs at a certain time. So concerning the urgency of the job.
Yes, you can actually in the on configuration, you can actually schedule it supports cron syntax, so you can actually have your job execute at a specific time. Something I've noticed with some kind of organizations, maybe when they're doing deployments, maybe they only want to release or run the job on Monday, so you can actually configure your job to run at specific time of the week or month or year, because it actually supports cron syntax. For background jobs, because it's Bash, as long as you know how to start a background job in Bash and save time on the minutes your job is consuming, you can do that. So for instance, if maybe you are starting a MySQL instance and maybe it takes like, I don't know, 10 minutes because it's a heavy instance, you could actually have it run in the background so that you find that two things are running at the same time. And then you have something else running in the foreground. Are there any other questions?
Mike.
Uh-huh.
I think it's more of you say I've seen like that actions. CY.yml, it runs on PR on develop or a push on develop. So like just if you can just expand on your own preference or on how you work, how do you structure the branches and what rights do they have? At what points do the CI run? Yeah, such kind of
Okay.
structure.
For me personally, there's usually two situations where I used to determine the triggers. The first one is, do you want to check before it's merged, or do you want to check after it's merged? For instance, a situation where I want to deploy to a server or deploy to the App Store or something, that in that situation, I would only want the job to run when it's merged. Now, the funny thing about that is it does not offer like a simple syntax for running a specific job when a job is merged. But because GitHub supports expressions, you can actually check certain conditions. As in the action world, as an action is running, there are certain variables which are set depending on certain situations. So for instance, if a branch is merged with another branch, you can actually get that information because GitHub Actions actually has access to that, to your repo, and you can actually access specific information. So for instance, if you needed to run a job only when a job was merged, you can do that. Personally, I usually look at those two situations, whether do I need to run the job before or do I need to run the job after. If I need to run the job before, setting up a normal, okay, and once, if I need to run the job before, do I need to run it when I push code, or do I need to run it when it's a merge request or a PR? So now, depending on the project, if it's a personal one or if it's a public facing project where there's multiple contributors, I kind of choose one option over the other. Like for this one, for DreadCon, because we needed to handle two situations. A situation where a maintainer of the project needed to push code urgently without doing a PR. So we needed to support both pushes and PRs. So the pull request will be for maybe third-party contributors who are maybe adding a feature or fixing a bug. Then we need to make sure that specific checks run. But also we need to make sure that when a maintainer pushes code directly to a specific branch, that the checks still run, just to make sure that no one breaks anything. But yeah, for me, it's really those two conditions. Do I run the code before a PR or after a PR? If it's a personal project, I rarely have PRs. It's mostly, I put the conditions when I push code. So maybe I need to run the test or I need to deploy. So yeah, it depends. Because you can make use of if expressions, you can actually really go all out and really come up with a complex way of running your actions depending on certain situations. Yeah, certain situations. Yeah.
So I think still on the same, maybe can you, on branches and maybe contributors and external contributors, can you maybe describe on maybe your suitable flow of maybe how changes get merged and how you decide on branches, etc. Because I've been seeing maybe people struggling, you find like people like really struggle on how like maybe to maintain that kind of a setup where you have like one branch which has everything which is stable, then you have like kind of a separate feature branches. So can you maybe describe maybe that flow, maybe which you find like that works for you?
Okay. The moment I begin working with, okay, this is a principle. The moment I work with someone else, even if it's just one other person, I usually have two branches by default, and those branches are usually protected, meaning you can't switch branches. That's usually maybe or main, and then there's a develop branch or staging branch. Those two branches are usually protected, meaning you can't push code to it. You can only submit merge requests. Then what the next step I will do is I make the develop or staging branch my main branch, because I want it to be easy for anyone doing a PR to automatically not automatically. It makes the GitHub or subversion control automatically select the develop branch as the active branch. I think most of you have faced the situation where you are doing a PR to a project, but then you did it off the main branch, master branch, just because that's the default branch. So to avoid that hassle, I usually make the develop branch or the staging branch the default branch, just for easy PR management. Once I do that, because both branches are the master branch and the develop branch are protected for any change to reflect on those code bases, PRs have to be made. The fact that it's a PR, meaning you can add the necessary checks to the PR as soon as the PR is created or as soon as the PR is merged. In terms of naming branches, now that's usually according to the developer. I personally just usually, if it's a PR that is related to an issue, I just call the branch the name of the issue. For instance, issue 60 or issue 7. Or if I'm using Jira and that's a TRX -48, as in it matches the card on Jira. For issues which for PR which are not related to issues, I try to make it as descriptive as possible. I do not create branches thing called like bug fixes or add feature. No, I try to make it as descriptive as possible. So for instance, if I was adding a login page, I would call the branch add login page. So I try to use names to make so that if anyone is just reviewing a PR, the moment I just see the PR, okay, I see, oh, this branch is being added to this branch. And if it's an issue, I can reference the issue easily. Something I've started doing this year is create PR templates so that any person who's doing a PR has a specific structure of how they are doing PR, so that for any person, if any person was given the opportunity to review the PR, just by going through the description of the PR, they understand by the, okay, this does this and this and this. So the person doesn't really have to go to the code base to try and figure out what's going on. Yeah, so that's usually my usual workflow. I use named branches, staging and develop, or master and stock main are protected. You cannot push those branches, meaning that everything has to be done from a PR. If it's a PR, I make sure that all the checks are in place. So if tests need to run, if build checks need to be done, if linting needs to be done, I do that in the checks. That way, it helps. It keeps it as a maintainer. It keeps me sane. Meaning, by the time I'm reviewing code and everything passes, I know, by the way, and 80% of the work has been done. So it's my job is just to do 20%. And this way, I am never overwhelmed in terms of, oh, I have 10 PRs to review and there's no checks. So it keeps gives me enough time to actually just quickly go through PRs and review without spending too much time trying to figure out what's going on.
I guess you have explained that very well.
Any other question? But for hobby projects or personal projects, I just push to the main. I don't really have branches because I'm the only developer. So I just push to the main branch. The only difference is I add tests. Then if I'm doing like automatic deployment, I make sure that it runs after the tests check. So if the tests fail, not the steps which come after don't pass, meaning to deploy broken code, which is something I'm really happy with GitHub Actions handles properly. Because if you have like an unsuccess deployment, it runs whether the individual steps pass or fail, which is a huge nightmare if you're not keen about it. So that's something to take note of if you're using GitLab. But for as long as that comes after the broken step, it won't run. Any other questions? I don't know if there are, I can't find my Zoom. Here's my Zoom. I don't know if there are.
At the top.
Okay, I've opened it, but then it's showing me. Oh, unless I stop broadcasting. Oh, okay. Oh, chat. Okay. Oh, this is interaction for Zooming. Okay, good.
So is there like one feature that you feel like Actions should have that they're currently not having?
What does Actions not have that others have? I think. Oh, what really annoys me? Okay, but I think this is a personal thing. I have a very big issue when we start using YAML and start putting if conditions in YAML, as in just use a scripted language as in that really bothers me. As in, the moment we have to use if conditions in a configuration language, then why don't you just use a normal programming language? As in, throw in some JavaScript or some Python or some scripting language there, and because it can get really messy with if you have like some complex conditions for your CI. So I really wish they had not used YAML. I don't know why every tooling or every CI provider decides to go with YAML. It's so annoying. Okay, at least they not go with their own custom solution, like their own markup language or whatnot. But still, I really wish they had like used like a scripting language, which, or like JavaScript or Python or something, which you can easily, it's within your graphs. I think it's better in terms of in development, because if you can code your infrastructure, if you can code your CI, you are less likely to make grammar mistakes when coming up with the configuration. Oh, another thing is I really wish you could test your scripts, your CI locally. It's really annoying when you're setting up actions for the first time and you have to push like 15 times before you actually get it to run for the first time properly. It's so annoying, and it's something which is common to GitLab and Travis and Bitbucket. I don't know why they don't come up with a solution. I really hoped Action had actually thought about it and made it easy. And even if you're able to do it locally, the amount of steps and configurations you have to do to make it work locally it's not even worth it. You might as well just push 15 times and get it working than try to configure your local environment to make it work. So I really wish they would had made like a way of just testing the sanitizing your configurations before pushing, so that you can have like a clean record when using CI for the first time. So those are the two things I wish they had thought about, which really bug me every time I'm using GitHub Actions. But then since no other competitor is actually offering a similar an alternative, then it's like yeah, that's what we have currently in the CI/CD world.
So I think maybe on the internal test, I think maybe it will be kind of going against logic, because some teams, like maybe let's say you have a very huge production app, they prefer like, instead of having, let's say you have to run like UI tests, instead of having to run them locally, you just push them and the CI does that. So maybe having the CI first run.
Okay, I'm not referring to like running the CI. I'm kind of referring to like syntax. A lot of the times actions have like, most of these toolings have their own syntax. As much as it's YAML, it has like words. For instance, if I was to add like this, oops, where is it? This is valid YAML syntax, but according to GitHub Actions, that's not valid. So I really wish you could be able to like check this locally before you push. No, it's not all the time where you actually just type job. Sometimes you can just say jobs and you have an extra S apple, and everything breaks just because you forgot to, you had a typo in your code. So I really wish you could be able to sanitize your entire script locally before you push. Not at you have to run the entire script locally, but just these little things, so that you actually, because believe me, on a bad day you won't see this S. You'll debug for 3 hours and you would see it. Then you wake up in the morning and see, kumbe it was a typo. So I really wish they could actually have considered this. Maybe have a CLI tool of some kind which you just run on your actions and it verifies what do you call it, valid syntax, for lack of a better word.
I think we have the same for Bitbucket pipelines, where you have like, but it's kind of an online site where you paste like your YAML file, then it checks is it a valid one or is it like an invalid one. Do we have the same for GitHub Actions?
Good question. I've never really seen one. GitHub Actions online. GitLab is there for Bitbucket. I'm not sure if it's there for GitHub Actions. Okay, there seems to be a repo for it, but it's not hosted anywhere. So maybe this is a project someone can take up. Just have a Heroku instance somewhere. You create your Vuex or Vue or Angular or React app. Contribute to the society, and you've done good. People will be surprised. So there's no validator for GitHub Actions. Currently, it doesn't exist. So this is a project someone can take up.
I think it's talking of open source. Do you have any
I
other
think
person with a question?
on that, if we just go to GitHub Actions directly and create a file, I see it really gives a good support on syntax, highlighting, and errors. So I think if that kind of functionality can be brought offline, I think it can be better. Maybe a plugin for IDEs or something. So still
Oh
also
yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
it's a good file, but yeah, but they do have one just when you are
Oh, when you
when you're editing the action from GitHub
oh
direct.
okay, I see. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's there, but it takes a bit of steps just to get to it. You have to like create a dummy workflow online. So maybe yeah, maybe an ID plugin for VS Code or one of the IntelliJ products, and yeah, it will really help. Because I think most of the time when you're creating an action, chances are you're copying it from an existing project which you did some time back. So and sometimes you don't even have access to the internet. They're just trying to get it up and running quickly before it reaches 5 p.m. and you go home. So yeah, I think using it as an action, a plugin or yeah, plugin for one of the IDs or text editors would be a good idea.
Any other question or comment?
Michael,
Uh-huh.
there's something I've noticed. I don't really know if I'm the one who is doing it wrongly, or does the actions use the configuration which exists on the default branch? Because at
Okay.
times,
So, okay,
because at
something I
times you
noticed.
find like you do
Uh-huh.
like say you have a default branch master and say there was an issue on the action. So when you are doing the fix, you're on develop, but when you push, it still uses the one in the main branch, the default branch to run the C. I really don't know if that's really true or.
Yeah, I've actually, I think I've also, Harun and I have actually experienced that a lot when we were setting up actions for this repo. I don't know how they set it up, but it's weird because sometimes when you set up actions on a PR, the actions in the PR are run. So for instance, if you had like maybe what you said, like you had a defect on the main branch, then you do a PR. Okay, that's a strange use case. But what I noticed is if I added extra jobs to the current PR, the ones in the PR are run and not the ones on the master branch. So I think it's really buggy. I know there's an issue with actions when it comes to doing PRs. For instance, I know there are occasions where actions don't run. For instance, if you decide to change the base branch of a PR, it doesn't run. Like if, for instance, if you create a PR right now, then this is the wrong base branch, and you change it, the action won't run. Also, I noticed that, for instance, when you are doing like a fork or doing a PR from a different repo, sometimes it doesn't run. So as much as GitHub Actions is mature, it still has some really tiny annoying bugs which they've not fixed, and it's those kind of bugs which, yeah, today it works, but then tomorrow it pops up. So there are those tiny things which are still affecting GitHub Actions. I'm not sure if there's like an official place to report it. Okay, you can just go to Twitter. That's what I usually do. I just go tag people and they get back to you really quickly. So I think if that's a bug you've noticed, you can go and do that as well. But I know it's quite buggy as much as it's mature. There's small aspects of bugs that appear occasionally.
Any other question or comment? So I guess if we have none, we can maybe conclude our session. It's past time.
Good job, Michael.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael, for the session and for all those who attended. It was like an amazing session on GitHub actions and maybe some of the workflows to follow as a developer. Yeah, so we'll record this and upload it. It is already recorded. We'll upload it and share it in case maybe you want to refer to maybe a discussion that was in this. So thank you guys. See you next Thursday, same time, same place.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.